My name is Laura Washington. I am a Chicago Sun-Times columnist and political analyst at ABC7, and I'm very honored to be here tonight to lead this conversation with this very esteemed panel, who I'll introduce briefly in just a moment. I just wanted to tell everybody a little bit about what we're going to do tonight. We're going to have some conversation up here, sort of Chicago Tonight style, get into a little bit up here, and then we want to leave some time for conversation with you toward the end of the program. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our panel, but I also want to let you know that this is intended to be a very interactive and very engaged event. We want to have this conversation on multiple platforms. Congratulations, by the way, to the school project and to the consortium for the excellent work that you did in terms of the research and the documentary. Fabulous job that really helped set the stage. Just want to give them a round of applause. And the school project and its partners have set it up so that we have an opportunity to talk on Twitter, on Facebook, any way you want to engage, both folks who are in the audience tonight and those of you who are at home. And I just want to let you know there's two hashtags we're going to be using tonight. Hashtag the school project and hashtag CHI school closings, CHI school closings. We're going to be showing some of the commentary up here on the screen. We're going to be sharing it during the audience participation tonight, so get ready. Leave those phones on, just make sure the buzzers are off. So I want to start by introducing our panel, and starting on my immediate left is Elaine Allensworth, who is the Lewis Sebring Director of the Consortium on Chicago School Research, which you just heard from tonight. And at the consortium, she conducts studies on student success and school improvement. Elaine Allensworth. Jitu Brown, looks like you're already doing some twittering there. He's the National Director for the Journey for Justice Alliance, a network of 30 organizations who work at the grassroots level in 23 cities, and they're organizing around school improvement issues. Jitu Brown. Jesse Ruiz is an attorney and vice president of the Chicago Board of Education, and we're going to be respectful tonight. Jesse previously served as the chairman of the Illinois State Board of Education, and he's got a lot to offer in terms of telling us about CPS's policy. Jesse Ruiz. And finally, Asif Wilson is executive director of the Greenhouse Fellowship, a youth think tank in East Chicago, Indiana. He previously taught at the May Community Academy on the West Side before that school community ended in 2013. Asif Wilson. So we've got a lot to cover tonight, and I just want to jump right into it by getting each of you to react to what you've seen and heard already tonight, and particularly, what is your one takeaway, just one takeaway you can share with us? We'll get into more later about the research and the film that, in terms of what we can think about that can advance this issue going forward. We know what the history is. We've heard it tonight. What's the takeaway tonight that will help us advance the conversation toward better education?
Yeah. Well, one thing that really struck me in watching the video and listening to Molly speak was the importance of relationships and social connections in schools and learning. You know, schools are not just about curriculum and tests. They're about adults working with students, nurturing students, working together, working with families. And I think that's one reason the school's closings is so emotional for so many people, is because it oftentimes is a breaking of those relationships and having to start all over again.
Thanks, great point. You too.
I mean, I think the one takeaway is that school closings don't work, that this approach that from as early as 1998, when Einstein Elementary closed and Future Commons High School closed, that this policy has been driven by housing. It's been driven by the attempt to remake neighborhoods. And there's no honesty in the conversation, as if people aren't smart enough to realize that if you are shutting down housing, if you're closing hospitals, if you're closing grocery stores, and you're closing schools, you're actually disinvesting in a certain population of people. And that our suffering, and not only is school closings emotional, but the results of school closings are clear. We've got like 15 years of consistent data, and not only data, but people's stories, to say that this approach has not improved education in our city. We need to do what works. And meaningful parent and community engagement is critical to school success.
And so you're arguing that there was not enough meaningful parental engagement around this closing process?
I'll go even further than that. I think the policies that have been implemented in our communities are equivalent to walking into the doctor's office with a headache and 10 minutes later getting brain surgery. It's equivalent to that, because you can't point to, now what you can do is look in a city like Cincinnati, right? Urban city, where they've taken an approach to develop sustainable community schools. They've closed the opportunity gap. I don't look at it as an achievement gap. They've closed the opportunity gap. They've increased graduation rates. Students can go to a school across the street from their home, and it's a community school. Not only does it have a strong curriculum, wraparound supports, meaningful parent and community involvement, but it also serves as a community center, and it works. But we keep using this model that has there are horror stories that go back 10, 15 years. The woman that was on the film, Brenda Norwood, was the woman that called me on my cell phone in 2004 when Doolittle West was closing. And they shut down Doolittle West and sent those babies to Fuller without enough common sense to realize that many of their big brothers and sisters went to Doolittle East right next door. So I think it's that type of lack of connectedness to the people's lives that's driving these policies, and also screams for the need of an elected representative school board.
I'm sure, Ms. Ruiz, in addition to your takeaway, I'm sure you're going to want to respond to some of those comments.
And the takeaway is that these are gut-wrenching decisions that are difficult, that none of us created, none of us, I'd say, who were voting on these decisions. But the fact of the matter is, we've lost 145,000 school-aged kids in Chicago, and we have a school system built for 511,000, and we have less than 400,000 now. And so that's the problem, that these are demographic realities that we're facing, where entire swaths of our city. I look at the neighborhood I grew up in, and half my block, it's like Roseland. I grew up in Roseland, where my mother's still there. When I go and visit her, half the block is empty because the houses have all been torn down. The electromotive plant that used to be there, the Sherwin-Williams plant that used to be there, the Pullman railcar plant that used to be there, to have the jobs for middle-class families to live, are gone. And there wasn't any governmental entity that shut those businesses down. They left. That's global economics. But the reality is, you still have schools for those population of people who aren't there.
Right.
And so it's very, very expensive to make, excuse me, to maintain all those schools, and so you're forced to make incredibly difficult decisions. The one thing that, and yes, Rosemary, I have to always acknowledge you, because you're a very active participant at CPS meetings and here. Unfortunately, that's where the area of the city, the African-American population and some pockets of the Latino population, that's where the population loss was greatest, unfortunately.
So the earlier question is what? Okay,
the takeaway was some of the factors that were looked at.
So what
can
we do going forward to remedy the fact that these communities have been in many cases so devastated?
Going forward, to make sure that we closed a lot of 100-year buildings. And we used to build 100-year schools. Perhaps the model in Chicago shouldn't be that we're putting up very expensive 100-year buildings anymore. Maybe they should be 40-year buildings, and knowing that in 40 years' time, we're going to reassess if this building needs to be here. The school community is one thing, and that's one thing that Jitu mentioned is very important, and that's critical. The school community is critical. In a lot of instances, we were trying really hard to keep that school community together. But the building itself was underutilized, and every boiler that's got to be replaced in a 100-year-old building, that's $1 million. Right. Every roof that's got to be replaced in a 100-year-old, that's another $1 million. That you can't put it directly into teaching and learning.
I want to move on, Asif, but beyond the buildings, because we've been talking about people here and sort of the heartbreak.
And that was a key thing in this instance, where Jitu mentioned it's been 15 years. Mm-hmm. Prior years, it was mainly to address underperforming schools. This was to address underutilized schools, to finally try to right-size the capacity. And frankly, we still have a lot of overcapacity in the school. We probably have a good third too many high schools in the city for the amount of high school population of students we have. We have that many
Does
more
that-
seats.
Does that mean that there could be more closings in the
No,
offing in the
we have
next
said
few
there's a
years?
5-year moratorium. We're in a second year of a 5-year moratorium because we realize it's disruptive, and trust me, it's nothing that anybody wants to do.
You're going to start an action in here in a minute.
When I joined the school board, I did not join the school board to close schools.
Okay. We have to be respectful because we can't really have a conversation that's going to advance and create more opportunities for our community unless we're respectful. So appreciate that. Asif, what's your takeaway and anything you want to add or respond to for what you've heard so far?
So for me, it's more about accountability, less accountability to Goldman Sachs, these venture capitalist firms that are making millions of dollars off of the objectification of black and brown bodies who we tend to forget are human beings. And it's honestly sad to hear that we're comparing bodies, human beings, to cattle, and how many of them we can stuff inside of a classroom. So for me, it's about accountability. Like I said, parents spoke out about this. I'm not the only teacher that spoke out about this. My students weren't the only students that spoke out about this. Rosemary is not the only parent to be banned from a board meeting where she's supposed to have her voice accounted for. So for me, it's about accountability to the public.
And how do you make that happen?
And how do we do that? We elect people not like him, but for positions like his. So they can be held accountable to us as public constituents and not Mayor Emanuel, who doesn't give two shits about us.
Well, if I could respond, there are a number of elected school districts across this state that, frankly, when I was on the State Board of Education, I had to overtake because they weren't serving the interest of their students. You go to North Chicago, you go to East St. Louis, you go to Calumet Park. The State Board of Education has had, not to mention the financial oversight boards that had to take over numerous school districts in the state, all elected. Elected does not equal perfect, does not equal serving the interests, and arguably in some of those cases, they were serving the interests of all their family members who were working at the school board, not the students and the community members they were elected to represent. In South Cook, we had one of those
If it worked well, we wouldn't be the only school district in Illinois with an appointed school board. If that worked, there would be more.
But you know what? We've had some problems with some of our elected officials. Some are in jail right now. We've had quite a few aldermen go to jail. We've had some governors go to jail. So just let's be clear that electing officials on any level is not necessarily the panacea.
And I agree. An elected school board is not a guarantee to school improvement. I think you have some elected school boards that perform quite well, San Diego, California, places like that. So I think the issue is, with the exception of Mount Clair, New Jersey, virtually every appointed school board in the United States serves populations that have primarily African American Latino children. You will not see appointed school boards in the hills of West Virginia. You will not see appointed school boards in Tennessee, but you will see them in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, New Orleans. And there's no data, none, that says that appointed school boards have any connection to school improvement. What it does say in the Broad Institute's handbook is that a necessary ingredient to privatization is appointed school board. So I think, and I don't mean Mr. Ruiz is a nice man, so there's no disrespect. Jesse is nice, there's no personal disrespect. This isn't personal. This is about an agenda that has flowed downhill. It's failed in New Orleans. It's failed.
What is the difference between the cities where they're appointed school boards versus elected school boards? Is there a difference in the political environment, or why have some cities moved in that direction and others have not?
Well, I think you know, when you have communities that have been destabilized, I think people have to look at it like this. A great man once taught me that there are 5 basic institutions that people need in order to have a flourishing community: education, housing, healthcare, food production and delivery, and clothing. And if you want to destabilize a community, you destabilize those basic institutions. So when you look in Lincoln Park, and good people in Lincoln Park have Illinois Masonic Hospital, they have Agassiz as a neighborhood school, they have Whole Foods. They didn't have to protest to get that.
We got Whole Foods coming to Inglewood too, okay?
Oh, don't start.
Okay. But I
just want to say this. So my point is that if you want to create if you want to create good schools, you have to, one, help create healthy communities. But when you destabilize communities, you sabotage schools because there are pressures that we live in those neighborhoods that most folks in this audience don't understand. There are pressures that we live in those neighborhoods, conditions that we didn't create, conditions that are manufactured. And we have to have a level of bravery to talk. We have to have a level of honesty to talk about it. So I think that, why are these appointed school boards only in school districts that serve children of color? Why take away? When has our voice been heard in these environments? So did we have an elected school board in Chicago that messed up? There was some African-American parent that sat on the school board that stole money, that validated a reason? No, we've never had an appointed school board in Chicago.
Okay.
And so we've never
okay.
had an elected school board in Chicago. So I think the question is, as Asif said, accountability to the public. 15 years of failed corporate interventions and no accountability to the public. So they continue.
There is an opportunity.
And Jitu makes a point. In Chicago history, for over 140 years, it's always been an appointed school board. Frankly, when there were a lot less folks like you and me in the school system. So it's not about necessarily because it came about in 1871. And Chicago demographically did not look like it did today.
It used to have a board of trustees. So
it's always been appointed by the mayor for 140 years.
That's true. That's a fact. That's true. But the mayor has more control now over that board legally.
In 1995, there used to be a body that would nominate, and then he would select from that slate.
But that was really the mayor's.
That was the only difference in 1995.
Okay, I want to come back to you, Elaine.